Uh-oh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's
yeah.
go.
What a tie.
Professor Kale.
Looks so cute.
Hello, students
Woo.
and Professor
Woo.
Chambers.
Yeah.
Got you out in the back.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Woo.
Simmer, child. Simmer,
Hey.
simmer. Simmer.
Oh,
Yeah.
Simmer. Simmer. All right. You guys ready for this presentation?
Yeah.
All right. You guys ever wonder about history? I do a lot. But the medium matters as far as, how you indulge in your history. Ain't that right, fellas?
Absolutely. Yeah.
True.
Woo.
Yep. Now, I have a particularly vested interest in history because I am a history major.
Nerd.
Also true.
Indeed. So we're going to be talking
It's a
about
fact.
how the medium of history affects how we are able to digest it. So my project, my little presentation you guys are experiencing, is about this book right here and a video series known as Crash Course U.S. History by John Green. And this book is A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. It's a new take on United States history. So a little bit about my boy Howard. All right. He's a historian, a playwright, a social scientist, and a self-described anarchist, socialist, maybe a democratic socialist. I'm not one to judge. Uh-oh. All right. The audience of this book, it's kind of I don't know if you noticed, it's pretty thick, and it's for people like me who want to read about U.S. history for some reason. And like college students, contemporary historians, the like. The purpose? Well, fellow history writer Eric Foner says right here on the cover, historians may well view this as a step towards a coherent new version of American history. It's trying to kind of reinvent the wheel. Crash Course U.S. History. All the boys in the crowd definitely watch this couple times. Author John Green, young adult author, historian. He also works with the team of historians for all of his works. They're for high school students. AP US History students is kind of what it's made for. It's designed around the curriculum purpose. Get people into history. It's important to know. Now, here's some differences between written media and video media. The depth that you can go in written media, it's more extensive. I mean, most people don't want to sit through an hour-long lecture about history. When you already bought the book, you kind of feel like you got to read it. It's easier to source. You can source as you're writing, and then you just have your sources at the back. Financial transparency. You've already bought the book. They don't really have that much of an agenda after that. Unless they do. For video, you've got an ease of access. Most video is pretty easy to digest. And visual assets, the ability to use visuals in a presentation is extremely important in how it is able to be absorbed by the viewer. And speed, you can get through a lot more information in a shorter amount of time. Examples of differences between the mediums. So I've got 3 different examples that we're going to go through and how they represent these different parts of U.S. history differently. First one, U.S. Revolution. The book, this quote is, but the elites knew the revolution had no appeal to slaves and Indians. They would have to woo the armed white population. This was not easy. Yes, mechanics and sailors, some others were incensed against the British, but general enthusiasm for the war was not strong. Oh my goodness. I don't know why this is happening. While much of the white male population went into military service at one time or another during the war, only a small fraction stayed. John Shea, in his study of the Revolutionary Army, a people's numerous and armed, say that they grew weary of being bullied by local committees and safety and by bands of the revolution. Now we're going to play a little link that I
But
embedded
actually,
for this.
well, yeah, let's go to the thought bubble. Morale among Continental soldiers was
Very
often pretty
professional,
low.
Professor.
Rations
Thanks.
were poor and soldiers went unpaid. As Joseph Plum Martin, a soldier from Connecticut, wrote, they felt they were starving in detail for an ungrateful people who did not care what became of us. And many other colonists didn't fight for independence. They fought with the British. Others were pacifists, like the Quakers, who often had their property confiscated when they refused to fight. And in colonial America, of course, losing property also meant losing rights. And for slaves, the so-called fight for freedom was very different than it was for Continental soldiers, because loyalty to Britain in the war could mean freedom. In 1775, British...
That's about as far as I'm going to go with that one. But you can see there's a little bit of a difference in the information being exchanged. In the book, it was more of a statement about how the population of America wasn't necessarily all gung-ho about the war. But in the video, it was more of a contemporary idea of all of white America going off to war. Skipped a slide. So this one about the Civil War, it would take either a full-scale slave rebellion or full-scale war to end such a deeply entrenched system, speaking about slavery. If a rebellion, it might get out of hand and turn its ferocity beyond the slavery to the most successful system of capitalist enrichment in the world. If a war, those who made the war would organize its consequences. Hence, it was Abraham Lincoln who freed the slaves, not John Brown. And in 1859, John Brown was hanged with federal complicity for attempting to do by small-scale violence what Lincoln would do by large-scale violence several years later. Not the country.
John Brown anyway. Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course U.S. History, and today we're going to talk about the United States. In 1859, John Brown led a disastrous raid on the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, hoping to capture guns and then give them to slaves who would rise up and use those guns against their masters. But Brown was an awful military commander and not a terribly clear thinker in general, and the raid was an abject failure. Many of the party were killed, and he was captured, he stood trial, and was sentenced to death. Thus, he became a martyr to the abolitionist cause, which is probably what he wanted anyway. On the morning of his hanging, he wrote, I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. Well, he was right about that.
He was right about that. But there's a bit of a difference in how those two different, how the same moment in history was explained. In the video, it was kind of just a retelling of what happened, and in the book, it was more of a statement about the actual effects of John Brown's rebellion and the eventual war that would follow. So my next example is a little bit more obscure than the Revolution and the Civil War. So a little bit of background about the Ludlow Massacre, which took place in Colorado. I think so. It was a strike of several coal miners in the Rockefeller Coal Mining Corporation. They struck with their families, and then eventually, with the approval of the governor, 19 were killed, 12 being children. They were burned and shot in their tents. So a quote from the book is, when the strike began, the miners were immediately evicted from their shacks in the mining towns. They set up tents in the nearby hills and carried on the strike. The picketing and from these tent colonies. The Colorado governor, as referred to by a Rockefeller mine manager, was our little cowboy governor, called out the National Guard. On the morning of April 12th, a machine gun attack began on the tents. The miners fired back. Their leader was lured into the hills to discuss a truce, then shot to death by a company of National Guardsmen. At dusk, the guard moved down from the hills with torches and set fire to the tents, and the families fled into the hills. 13 people were killed by gunfire. And to make a little bit of a point, I don't have a video representing this example because it isn't mentioned in the video series. This is often seen where lesser known actions of violence are kind of just glazed over in the view of looking for a clean and not very dirty American history. So why does it matter? It matters because most people are going to watch the videos. Most people are going to come in contact with history in a medium that isn't exactly built to give the full context. It's easy for a video to be created with the intent of holding a viewer's attention with stats about a war or speeches or nice visuals when you kind of need to sit down and you need to read and see what actually might have happened, and the actual things that happen aren't often represented in a video because it's hard to look at and it's hard to market. So that's proof that I read it. I don't really need that because I can just show you. Took me like 40 hours. You're welcome, Ms. Chambers. Here's some of my opinions because I get to say my opinions. This is my presentation. Both of these are extremely valuable historical works. I enjoyed both of them. I've watched through all of John Green's U.S. history videos. I think they're amazing as a resource for young historians, people who are interested in U.S. history but don't have the time to completely indulge themselves in a complete history of the United States. The book is extremely politically charged. It is in constant critical view of the American government and the elites of this country and its past and present. Is that earned? Maybe, but that's my politics. Crash Course U.S. History is an extremely good resource if you just need to learn about a subject quickly. It's very concise in how it uses its time, and you're able to get through a lot of history very quickly. Rock peaked in the 70s, and DreamWorks Megamind is an underrated masterpiece, in my humble opinion. Any questions for the crowd? Please.
Yeah. So what is DreamWorks Megamind?
And please explain Rock peaked in the 70s.
So come on, class. Let's keep it topical. Megamind is a movie about a blue-headed fiend that becomes the not fiend at the end. Tall guy in the back.
I'm not tall at all, honestly. I'm just elevated by the stadium seating we have in here. Though I do have a question. Which type of historical media would you prefer? Books or the video series documents?
I find books to be a good resource when actually trying to learn the most that I can about a topic. But they are long, and I don't read very good, so it takes a while. But, you pay the price, as they say in France. Thanks for watching, guys. That was fun, I guess. Here are my sources in MLA format, Ms. Chambers. And yeah, bye.